So week 11 of the NFL season did not disappoint and included some wild finishes, including in-game rushing touchdowns by multiple quarterbacks, another game-winning blocked field goal, one team completely cleaned house, firing their GM, with more expected to make some firings here very soon. Some teams have playoff hopes hanging in the balance, while others, they are completely gone. So I've got to talk about all that and more right after. All right, before we get into some of the biggest takeaways from the Week 11 games, there are quite a bit. I did want to quickly talk about the New York Giants. They were on their bye week, but still managed to make the news after it was reported on Monday morning they would officially be benching Dan, no longer the man, Jones. It comes as no real surprise here. The Giants have lost 5 games in a row and are one of the worst teams in the NFL with a 2-8 record. They rank dead last in points per game and 26th in passing yards per game. And they signed him to a 4-year, $160 million deal at the end of the 2022 season, to many around the league's surprise. But it appears that he has played his last game as a New York Giant. It's been reported that the team is likely going to cut ties with him after the year and will be content to just eat all the dead money in his contract, similar to what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're going to have to eat some dead money in order to do so. Now, benching Jones does help save them some money. It helps prevent a $23 million injury guarantee from kicking in for the 2025 season, even though the Giants say the move to bench Daniel Jones was purely a football decision. Yeah, sure. So that means it's Drew Lock season, right? I mean, he's been the one who has come in for Daniel Jones at times this season when Brian Daboll has benched Jones periodically. Well, not so fast, because the Giants are reportedly rolling with Tommy DeVito, Danny DeVito's cousin, as the starting quarterback, and Drew Lock is going to back up DeVito. You probably remember old Tommy. He was a bit of a cult hero when he started 6 games for the G-Men last year. He wasn't horrible in that span, going 3-3 and throwing for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. It is a little odd that he's getting the nod over Drew Lock, though. A couple reasons for that is probably 1, they're trying to tank for a higher draft pick, and 2, trying to save even more money. There's incentives built into Lock's contract that earns him quite a bit more money if certain thresholds are met, but you can't meet said thresholds if you remain on the bench. Anyway, enough Giants talk for today. Let's get into some of these games. First up, the football gods were so amused by a team beating their division rival by a blocked field goal last week, they decided to make it happen again. The 6-3 Packers came into Soldier Field 6.5-point favorites over the 4-5 Bears, whom they have beaten 10 times in a row. The Bears actually, though, had the lead 19-14 late in the fourth quarter, but this 60-yard catch and run by Christian Watson and a scramble by Jordan Love helped set up that go-ahead touchdown via a QB sneak. They couldn't get the 2-point conversion, though, so the Bears had a chance to go win it on a field goal, with the score being 20-19. Caleb Williams made a great play here on 3rd and 19, ducking out of a sack, then firing a missile to Rome Odunze to make it 4th and 3. He went right back to him on the next play, connecting with him on a back shoulder throw to pick up the first and keep him alive. Next, he hit Keenan Allen to pick up another first down, and after a couple runs, they were looking at a 46-yard field goal attempt to win the game. And that's when Bears fans once again got their hearts broken. Cairo Santos's kick was a little low. I mean, you got to kick it lower on longer field goal attempts. And the Packers got pressure through the middle, with Carl Brooks getting his hand on it, causing it to fall short. An absolutely insane ending that mirrored last week's game between the Chiefs and Broncos that ended in a blocked field goal. It's another brutal loss for the Bears, who were on the wrong end of that Hail Mary against the Commanders a few weeks ago, and then the blocked field goal most recently. And that's the difference of the Bears being 6-4 and alive in the wild card race, and now being 4-6 and having fans calling for Matt Eberflus's job. Speaking of coaches whose job is in jeopardy, Doug Peterson is almost certainly going to get canned any day now, because it's being reported that the Jags are expected to make, quote, major changes after getting blown out by the Lions 52-6. On Sunday. It was a brutal showing for the Jags, with Mac Jones once again getting the start for the injured Trevor Lawrence. They lost another piece on offense as well, as it was reported yesterday that Gabe Davis tore his meniscus during the game and is set to undergo season-ending surgery. Now, as far as a game goes between Jacksonville and Detroit, everyone knew the Jags had no chance in this one, but it was even uglier than you could imagine. The Lions scored touchdowns on their first 7 drives of the game, which is pretty wild, and after going up 49-6, they pulled most of their starters for nearly the entire fourth quarter. Jared Goff bounced back from his 5-interception performance last week and threw a perfect game this time around, completing 24 of 29 passes for 412 yards, 4 touchdowns, and finished with a perfect passer rating. Detroit outgained Jacksonville 645 yards to 170, had the ball for nearly 19 more minutes, and had 28 more first downs. They set multiple single-game team records on the day. Largest margin of victory, total net yards, and total first downs. It's now the second time this season, by the way, they've put up 52 points on a team, as they did that against the Titans back in Week 8. They're now 9-1 on the season with the highest scoring offense and the 5th best scoring defense. I don't know how you beat this team at the moment, and apparently Vegas doesn't think anyone can or will, because after that blowout win, they are now favorites to win the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. So they may be the Super Bowl favorites, but the Vikings at least are not too far behind in the division. They moved to 8-2 on the year after getting the dub over the Titans, 23-13 on Sunday. Sam Darnold bounced back from his ugly 3-interception game last week and finished with 246 yards and 2 touchdowns while avoiding turning over the ball. He technically was credited with a fumble on their opening drive, but it was really on Aaron Jones as he couldn't handle the pitch that was right in his hands. The Titans are struggling to beat anybody these days, but they are damn good at beating themselves. They had 13 penalties in this game. Yeah, 13 compared to the Vikings' 3, with many of them coming in crucial situations. Some of them were a little questionable, but 13 penalties is insane and an example of an undisciplined football team. To his credit, Will Levis looked a lot better these last couple of weeks despite the Titans losing the games. He played against the number 1 scoring defense last week in the Chargers, and then this week against the Vikings, who are tied for the 3rd most sacks in the league. They definitely rattled him at times as he was pressured on 46% of his dropbacks and got sacked 5 times when the Vikings sent just 4 or fewer pass rushers. That defense is legit, and if Sam Darnold can avoid being Sam Darnold at times, then they will certainly be a contender in the NFC. Now, a team who is scratching and clawing their way back into the playoff picture is going to be the Miami Dolphins. They've now won 2 straight and moved to 4-6 after handling the Raiders on Sunday 34-19. Tua played excellent. He was 28 of 36 for 288 yards and 3 scores while throwing 0 picks. Jonnu Smith had himself a day, catching 6 passes for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns, including this 57-yarder where he was wide open, and boy, oh boy, does this man have some freaking wheels for a tight end. Speaking of tight ends making plays, Brock Bowers continues to be an absolute monster. He was targeted 16 times, catching 13 of those for 126 yards and a big boy touchdown, breaking this tackle and getting in for the score. Those receptions, by the way, the 13 receptions, were the most by a rookie tight end in a single game in NFL history. He now has 70 on the year, which is second behind only Jamar Chase, who has 73, but Chase has also played 1 more game than Bowers. He also has the 2nd most receptions in a player's first 10 career games in NFL history, just 1 behind Odell Beckham Jr. So yeah, this man is special. As a Chiefs fan, I hate to admit it, but this man is special for a Raider. He is balling, and he's been putting up those numbers with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. So if there's a bright spot for the Raiders right now on offense, it's definitely the future of Brock Bowers. Next up, the Rams escaped Foxborough with a win, though it got a little dicey for them towards the end. They took a 28-13 lead late in the 3rd quarter, and it appeared like the game was as good as over. But the Pats came back and actually had a chance to go win it as they got the ball down 28-22 with a little over 2 minutes to go. However, on 3rd and 13, Drake May fired this ball over the middle, but his receiver wasn't even looking for it, and Cam Kinchens picked him off to seal the win for LA. It was definitely a bummer for the game to end like that for Drake May because he was playing solid up until that point, throwing for 282 yards and a couple tutties. But the grizzled vet Matt Stafford came away on top, throwing for nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, with 3 of them going to his favorite duo, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who were dominant in this one. They caught a combined 13 passes for 229 yards and 3 scores. The Rams desperately needed that win after last week's loss to the Dolphins because, as you'll see in this next game I talk about, the NFC West is absolutely insane right now. The Niners and Seahawks went down to the wire as Seattle's defense got a big stop and their offense got a chance with a little under 3 minutes left in the game. They were down 17-13 with their offense struggling for most of the game to get anything going. What did get going on the final drive was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who caught 4 passes on the final drive to help move them down inside the red zone. Geno Smith then said, "I'll take it from here, boys," and he took off from the pocket and rushed into the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown with just 12 seconds remaining. That ultimately gave them the win. It was a huge dub for Seattle because had they lost, they would have dropped to 4-6. But since they won, they're now 5-5 with the Rams and the 49ers. The Cardinals are clinging on to a 1-game lead right now, but your guess is as good as mine as to who is going to come out on top of the NFC West. And in the AFC, the Indianapolis Colts are not dead yet. They did, however, kill the hopes and dreams of the New York Jets on Sunday. Anthony Richardson got the start after being benched for Joe Flacco the past 2 weeks, and you got to give him credit. This man played one of the best games of his young career. He did lose a fumble on a strip sack on their opening drive in the second half, but aside from that, he was smart with the football and was pretty efficient by his standards. He was 20 of 30 for 272 yards and a touchdown to Josh Downs, plus he clutched out the game-winning drive at the end. They were down 27-22 with a little over 2 minutes to go, and he fired a perfect pass to Alec Pierce down the sideline to get them down to the Jets' 27. Another great throw to Josh Downs gave them the first down. Then on 3rd and goal, he showcased what motivated the Colts to draft him 4th overall last year. He took off on a designed run and plowed his way into the end zone for what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown after the Jets failed to move the ball into field goal range. If they weren't cooked before, the Jets definitely are now. They've lost 7 of their last 8, are just 1-5 since firing Robert Saleh, and now also just fired their GM. So not only are they 3-8 on the season, sitting below the Dolphins and Bengals in the conference standings, but Joe Douglas is now out as the team's GM. He was on the last year of his contract anyway, but it seems like the ownership has had enough, and that means the Jets are once again heading into a complete rebuild. I feel like this is the cycle of life, just destiny. Every couple of years, the Jets completely clean house and rebuild. The Colts, on the other hand, are just 1 game behind the Broncos for the final wild card spot, and they actually play each other in Week 15, so that should be a huge game for both teams. Now, a massive game that took place this week was the Steelers and Ravens. Heading into this week, the Ravens had the number 1 scoring offense and the Steelers had the number 2 scoring defense. Well, this one definitely played more into the Steelers' hands as it was a low-scoring affair that felt more like the AFC North rivalry games of old. The Ravens ultimately made way too many mistakes in this one. Derrick Henry fumbled on the opening drive. Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals. Then Isaiah Likely fumbled before halftime that set up a Steelers field goal instead. Russell Wilson threw a god-awful pick in the red zone, but it didn't matter because Lamar Jackson, Merry Christmas, early Christmas, threw one right back to him on the next possession. Honestly, it was an incredible play by Peyton Wilson, who just took it away from Justice Hill. Baltimore found themselves down 10-18 late in the 4th quarter, and while they did score a touchdown, they couldn't convert the 2-point conversion, and that was all she wrote. Pittsburgh, by the way, they did not score a single touchdown on the day, making 6 field goals. Chris Boswell banged them through, and the forced turnovers by their defense was enough to get the job done. And this is actually the second time the Steelers have won a game by kicking 6 field goals. They beat the Falcons 18-10 week 1, which is pretty impressive. That more is a stat for the Steelers defense and how elite they are, in my opinion, but an impressive stat nonetheless. Now, if Justin Tucker could have made just one of those field goals, the Ravens likely could have gotten the win. I don't know what's going on with this man, but Justin Tucker seems to no longer be him. Back-to-back years has struggled from 50+, and he's now missed 6 field goals this year and has the lowest field goal percentage of his career by far. In fact, after those 2 misses yesterday, he's actually no longer the most accurate kicker in NFL history. His percentage dropped to 89.3 for his career, and Eddie Pinheiro passed him up at 89.4%. So it's kind of wild to see such a downfall from him after he's been so clutch for his entire career. Maybe there's an injury we don't know about. I'm not really sure. He's only 34 years old, and that's not really that old for a kicker. So your guess at this point in time is as good as mine. I mean, I guess he could be washed, but time will surely tell there. Anyway, enough kicker talk. The Steelers took a 2-game lead in that division and are now on fire right now, having won all 4 games with Russell Wilson as the starter. Next up, the Broncos were so pissed off that they lost on a blocked field goal last week to the Chiefs that they took out their frustration on the Atlanta Falcons and beat the ever-loving piss out of them, 38-6. Their defense was flying around, holding Atlanta to just 226 yards and not giving up a single touchdown. Bo Nix had himself a career day, going 28 of 33 for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns. Sheesh, that is a pretty good game. He may have had some struggles early on in the year, but gotta be honest, he's looking like the franchise QB that Sean Payton was having wet dreams about, at least as of late. In fact, with that performance on Sunday, he became the first rookie quarterback in NFL history to complete 80% or more of his passes and throw for 4 or more touchdowns and 300-plus yards. So congratulations, Denver. You might have finally found your post-Peyton quarterback, which I do hate to admit. All right, did you guys know that Marquez Valdez-Scantling is now the greatest receiver of all time? Yeah, it turns out that playing with Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen was holding him back this whole time. All he needed was to play with Derek Carr. Last week, he had 109 yards and 2 touchdowns, shocking everyone. Then this week, he followed that up by catching this pass over the middle and zooming 71 yards for another touchdown. I feel like I woke up in some alternate reality because MVS catching touchdowns from Derek Carr, that was not on my 2024 bingo card, and neither was Kadarius Toney playing in the same game as MVS. He now plays with the Browns and had 1 carry for -7 yards. But as far as the game goes, famous Jameis Winston did his best to keep the Browns in it by throwing for nearly 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it wasn't enough as Cleveland had 4 drives end with either a missed field goal or a turnover on downs. Running back, fullback, tight end, quarterback, head coach, waterboy hybrid Taysom Hill was the Saints' best player all game, rushing for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns on just 7 carries. That included a 33-yarder on 4th and 1, and then a 75-yarder late in the 4th. Good God. The Saints came out on top 35-14 and moved to 4-7 on the year, but unless they basically win out, they don't really have a shot in the playoffs. Next, I covered this game in much greater detail on my main channel, How About Those Chiefs? But since it was probably the game of the week, I gotta mention it here. The Kansas City Chiefs and their undefeated season is officially over. The Bills pulled out the win with Josh Allen putting the game on ice via this 26-yard run, dodging multiple players and trucking his way into the end zone on 4th and 2. It was a very entertaining game featuring 5 lead changes throughout. Mahomes did struggle at times. He threw 2 picks in this game, one early on that the Bills turned into 7, and threw for just under 200 yards, though he did throw for 3 touchdowns, including a couple to Noah Gray, and that was a career first for Gray to have more than 1 touchdown. Mahomes' second pick, it was a desperate garbage time heave, so that one just is what it is. Meanwhile, Josh Allen threw a pretty bad pick himself, but between his 262 yards through the air and 55 more on the ground, the Bills found a way to get the dub. I mean, they won by 9, so it was close-ish until about 2.5 minutes to go until they scored that touchdown, and they advanced to 9-2 on the season. It'll be interesting to see how things play out down the stretch, as the Bills are now just a half game behind the Chiefs for the 1 seed. According to ESPN, the Bills have the 16th remaining strength of schedule, while the Chiefs are actually 30th. Their first half of the schedule was hard as hell, but back half much easier. So if I had to bet on who is actually going to end up with the 1 seed, I'm still probably going to put my money on the Kansas City Chiefs, but we shall see. Another team that's climbing up the standings in the AFC is the LA Chargers, who, after beating the Bengals on Sunday Night Football, now have the 4th best record in the AFC. That win did not come without some sketchy moments down the stretch, though. The Chargers had a 27-6 lead in the 3rd quarter, but the Bengals came roaring back, scoring 3 touchdowns on their next 3 possessions, with Jamar Chase catching 2 of them and T. Higgins catching the other. That 3rd score made it a tie game at 27 apiece, with all the momentum on the Bengals side. However, with a chance to take the lead, Evan McPherson missed not 1, but 2 field goals on back-to-back possessions. The Chargers then had a chance to right the ship and take the lead with under 2 minutes left in the game, but went 3 and out. Cincy had a shot to go win it, but they too had to punt after picking up just 1 first down. And that's when Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey, the Irishman himself, connected on 2 chunk plays to move them down all the way to the 29-yard line. I thought they were then just going to run out the clock and take the field goal, but J.K. Dobbins had other plans, breaking free on this incredible run and put LA up 34-27 with 18 seconds left. Normally in that circumstance, you'd prefer your running back to just go down at the 1-yard line so you can kick the game-winning field goal without leaving any time on the clock, but it all worked out in the end as Derwin James rocked T. Higgins on the final Hail Mary attempt, giving the Chargers the win 34-27. And honestly, after 2 games ending in blocked field goal attempts, I don't even blame J.K. Dobbins for just going ahead and scoring that touchdown. This was yet another example for the Bengals, with Joe Burrow and the offense putting up a piss ton of points, but the defense giving the game away. Burrow leads the NFL in both passing yards and touchdowns, only throwing 4 interceptions on the entire season. They have the 6th highest scoring offense in the league, yet their defense, not good. They're giving up nearly 27 points per game, which is 5th worst in the league. If before the season you were to show me Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase's stats through 11 weeks, I would have sworn they were one of the best teams in the league, or at least definitely a playoff lock. But instead, they are 4-7, and they are behind the Broncos, Colts, and Dolphins for the 7th seed. And considering they still have to play the Steelers twice, I think we can pretty much put a bow on the Bengals season. And finally, the Cowboys are such a mess right now that even their stadium is falling apart. Before their Monday night game against the Texans even started, a big piece of sheet metal fell from the roof when they were trying to open it. Thankfully, nobody was injured by this because, as you can see in the video here, that's a pretty big piece. And then another piece fell and landed on a catwalk, so they had to bolt the piece of sheet metal to the catwalk to keep it from falling during the game. That was a pretty wild way to start this one and kind of sums up the sheet storm of a season the Cowboys have had. You like that? And you know who else had a wild start to this game? Nico Collins. He'd missed the last 5 with a hamstring injury, but made his return last night. And on the very first play of the game, CJ Stroud hit him on a little screen pass to the left, and he took off, sprinting through Dallas's defense for a 77-yard touchdown. But sadly, the play got called back on an ineligible man downfield. That was called on Laramie Tunzel. So definitely a bummer there. And while Nico ended up with a modest stat line on the night, he did get to showcase his speed once again on this 33-yard catch and run later on in the 3rd quarter. He and Tank Dell actually had matching stat lines with each other, catching 4 passes on 7 targets each for 54 yards apiece as they led Houston in receiving. CJ Stroud nor the receivers really had to do all that much in this one, though, as it was a Joe Mixon show all the way. He put the team on his back, rushing for over 100 yards and scoring 3 touchdowns on the night. He's been a godsend for this offense, who has struggled at times. He did miss 3.5 games due to an ankle injury this season, but has still rushed for over 100 yards 6 times and is 3rd in rushing yards per game, only behind Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. So yeah, his 3 touchdowns plus a wild scoop and score that hit 5 different players before Derek Barnett corralled it and housed it early in the 4th quarter helped Houston beat the brakes off the Cowboys 34-10. And with that loss, the Cowboys are now 3-7 and 0-5 at home. Cowboys, their season is good as gone, but at least they're one step closer to being able to draft Travis Hunter this offseason. The Texans have a 2-game lead and the tiebreaker over the Colts, so the odds are in their favor to win the AFC South, even if the rejuvenated Anthony Richardson does give Indy a bit of a spark. And those were some of the biggest storylines and takeaways, most surprising moments from Week 11. I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on all of this, everything that transpired this week, and who you think will wind up in the postseason once all is said and done. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.